like fuckery with those watches. Like I brought my watch. I have a Rolex that my friend Lorenzo gave me, and I brought it to the watch store, and I said, this thing's always fast. I said, it's always like after a couple months, it's like 5 minutes fast. And they go, yep. They go, yeah.
Really?
It's just what it does.
Okay.
And I go, hold on. I go, so you're telling me that it just is always going to be fast? It's like, yeah. It's just like every few months you got to like reset it.
Seems like they should recalibrate that thing.
They can't. They tried. They say every few months, whether it's 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, it's going to be a couple minutes fast.
Okay, it seems like they should really recalibrate that, because if it's always fast, you can just delete those minutes.
You need to fucking kick down the door at Rolex. You go, you bitches are lazy. Okay, let's look at watches. There's no real improvement in performance, right? I mean, they're beautiful, but I mean, the performance difference between now and 10 years ago is not. The whole thing is fucking insane. It's insane. The whole thing is nuts.
Joe Rogan has allegedly uncovered something explosive, something that's sending shockwaves through the fashion world, according to what's being reported. Chinese manufacturers have officially pulled the plug on all production for Hermès and Louis Vuitton. No more bags, no more belts, no more made somewhere else stamped under the illusion of French craftsmanship. And here's the kicker. They're not leaving quietly, they're blowing the whistle on what really happens behind those luxury labels. We're talking about explosive claims of outrageous profit margins, $20,000 to $30,000 per item that cost less than $2,000 to produce. Joe didn't just mention it in passing. He's naming names, he's calling out the markup, the deception, and the machine that keeps these billion-dollar brands running. He's not sugar-coating it. He's not asking politely, he's slicing through the glamour like a scalpel right to the nerve, because when you hear that, the factory cost of a Hermès bag is less than 5% of its price tagged, you start asking some dangerous questions. And Rogan's entire point is this: what happens when consumers wake up and realize they've been paying for a fantasy?
Most of them are made in China, and most of them are made in our factory. Yeah, I'm telling you. But why these luxury brands never tell you that? Because they are trying to pretend to be products of some sophisticated European countries like Italy or France.
We are going to be successful. In a few weeks, the shop was open. We sell the most expensive products in a country where everybody was going by.
This all started with videos, raw, unfiltered, and damning. TikTok clips, YouTube breakdowns show former Chinese manufacturers and factory managers stepping out from the shadows and showing receipts. Literally, they're walking viewers through the actual cost of production for bags that retail for tens of thousands. And guess who grabbed it and ran with it? Joe Rogan. He didn't just reference these whistleblowers. He put their voices on blast on his show. He explained how these were the very same workshops in LV he leaned on for years, quietly behind the curtain.
I remember that I was talking to my husband about China and all of the craziness that's going on there right now, right? You look at these videos and you just go, how on earth? And I just said, how is this possible? How is it possible? Where they don't know what they're fighting for. This is how it's always been. It brought me to an understanding of how delicate freedom is.
And now they've had enough. These manufacturers are saying, we're done. They're pulling out. Why? Because they say they're tired of making pennies while the brands they supply make millions. They're tired of the lies, the smoke, the illusion. Rogan's tone isn't speculative, it's surgical. He believes the reason these factories are walking away is because the margins are obscene. It's not about craftsmanship. It's not about legacy. It's about keeping the illusion alive long enough to justify a $40,000 handbag. And now that illusion is cracking wide open. Let's get specific. Rogan doesn't stop at broad accusations. He digs into numbers. One of the most iconic luxury items on the planet is the Hermès Birkin bag. If you're lucky enough to even get offered one, you're looking at a price tag starting around $38,000. Some go far higher, but the real cost to make it...
This is what he's announcing today. He has said that the reciprocal tariff, this is Scott Besson who announced it, the reciprocal tariff on China, where we jacked ours up to 125 and then they jacked theirs up on us to 125 for all goods, is now going to 10%.
According to factory insiders, just $1,450, that's it, less than the cost of an iPhone. That includes everything: the leather, the stitching, the metal, the thread. Even if it's made by a skilled French artisan, the production cost barely breaks $2,000. So what does that mean? It means these brands are marking up their products by 25 to 30 times. You're not paying for a bag. You're paying for a story, for status, for a logo. Rogan doesn't dance around this. He says it flat out. These brands are selling you a fantasy wrapped in overpriced leather. And here's what makes it even more sinister. This information has been hidden for decades.
These are pieces of artwork. These artisans train years and years to make one of these bags.
Fabrice is doing the last stitching on a Kelly bag. A Kelly takes around 13 hours to be made, depending on the materials that we make it. Our artisans, they need to do 4 years of training to be able to manufacture a Kelly bag.
Hermès says, made in China, does it feel cheaper? No, that's not a quality issue. It's luxury brand washing.
Consumers believe these bags were rare because of quality. Rogan says that's part of the manipulation. These aren't rare because they're hard to make. They're rare because the brand decided it's more profitable to make them feel rare. This is where the conversation shifts from cost to culture. Joe Rogan reframes the issue not just as a financial scandal, but a psychological one. Because if 90% of the cost is the logo, what are we really paying for? According to Rogan and the factory insiders he features, what Hermès and Louis Vuitton are really selling isn't craftsmanship. It's identity, it's belonging, it's signaling, and people fall for it willingly, even proudly.
It starts with 30 distinct cuts of leather and can take 20 hours to complete, 4 hours for just the handle. Put the finishing touches on a Kelly, the most difficult bag to build. Artisans rely on their training and muscle memory to make every bag.
This is why this bag from our factory only costs you 1,000 USD.
Have you all seen that TikTok by the Chinese guy exposing how luxury goods are actually made? The only real difference? China ships the products to Europe, slaps on a made in France or made in Italy label, and boom, luxury? It's ridiculous.
Rogan says the reason this exposure is gaining traction now is because people are finally starting to question it. Chinese content creators are pulling back the curtain. Everyday consumers are sharing cost comparisons. People are realizing that the bag on their arm might be expensive, but that doesn't mean it's valuable. The game is shifting. Luxury used to mean quality. Now it just means you overpaid. And in Rogan's words, that's not fashion, that's a hustle. And once that idea sets in, once you realize you've been buying status instead of substance, there's no going back. The question now is how many others will wake up too. This expose doesn't just ripple, it detonates. And it couldn't have come at a worse time for luxury giants. We're in the middle of global economic tension, trade wars, tariffs, inflation, and now this. Hermès responded fast. They raised US prices by as much as 10% overnight, blaming rising costs and import duties. But here's the thing. Rogan and many others aren't buying that excuse because if a $38,000 bag is supposedly affected by tariffs, how much was fluff to begin with? Other brands are scrambling too. Louis Vuitton issued press releases about their commitment to French craftsmanship. Fashion execs are suddenly talking about brand legacy and timeless quality in interviews. They're not doing damage control, they're doing identity repair. Some are leaning harder into mystique. Limited drops, closed-door showrooms, VIP access. Only others are going the opposite direction, trying to repackage their factories as temples of artisan excellence. Rogan says both strategies are desperate attempts to steer the narrative, because what we're seeing now is a power shift. The illusion used to be controlled by the brands, but this new wave of factory workers with phones, influencers with platforms, and Rogan with a megaphone is flipping the script. Now consumers are the ones managing the truth. Here's where things really get serious according to what's being discussed on Rogan's show. Chinese factories aren't just exposing the luxury giants. They're cutting ties completely. They're done. They're walking, and that move I saw just symbolic. It's operational chaos. The C are the same factories that have been quietly fulfilling bulk production for years. Not the limited edition showcase bags, but the core of the product lines. Wallets, keychains, entry-level luxury goods gone. Rogan sees this as the tipping point. Brands like Hermès and LV have been living off a two-faced model, publicly flaunting Parisian elegance while privately outsourcing to factories halfway across the globe. Now that curtain is collapsing. If China walks, these brands are in scramble mode. They'll have to restructure supply chains, find new partners, retrain labor, and perhaps for the first time actually be transparent about where their products come from. Rogan's angle. This is the end of hidden production, not because the brands wanted it, but because the manufacturers demanded it. When the people who've been making your product say no more, the illusion of control dies instantly. So what now? The luxury. Industry is standing at a crossroads, and Joe Rogan is standing right there holding a flashlight to the cracks in the path. With transparency, brands could finally step forward and tell the truth, breaking down the real costs. Show sourcing you're your own that your $30,000 handbag costs $2,500 to make. Will it hurt in the short term? Maybe, but long term. It builds trust. Lock it down. Make your products even harder to access. Raise prices under the guise of rarity. Spin the scandal into exclusivity. Gaslight the audience into thinking that exposure is just jealousy. Some brands are already testing this route, but Rogan says the public's not buying it. Not anymore. Because once the truth is out, it's out. You can't unsee the markup, and you can't forget the numbers. You can't look at a $2,000 key pouch and not wonder how many hands it passed through for 12 hours. This is where Rogan says the game gets interesting. Whoever can pivot honestly, boldly, and transparently wins the next era of luxury. Everyone else will stuck clinging to a fantasy that's already evaporating in plain sight. Joe Rogan didn't stumble into this story. He hunted it. He saw the factory videos, the raw confessions, and the cost breakdowns, and knew immediately what they meant. This wasn't just internet drama. This was the unraveling of an empire. And he didn't hold back on his podcast. Rogan amplified these whistleblowers like they were exposing a government cover-up. He laid out the margins. The brand psychology, the social manipulation, he compared it to modern-day snake oil salesmanship, sleek, seductive, and wildly overpriced. But more importantly, he reframed the whole luxury narrative. He called it what it really is: manufactured prestige, carefully engineered scarcity, and a generation of consumers who've been convinced that a logo stitched into leather makes them superior. Rogan didn't just comment on this story, he weaponized it. His fan base, massive and global, started talking, sharing and asking questions, and when Joe Rogan points the camera at you, you don't get to hide behind glossy marketing anymore for brands used to controlling their image down to the thread color. This is a nightmare. But for Rogan, it's just another day exposing systems built on illusion and watching them squirm when the truth walks in on air. Rogan pressed into why logos command insane premiums. He argued this is about control. Brands manipulate perception so effectively that people willingly pay tens of thousands for something that costs a few thousand. He posed hard questions. Are we supporting craftsmanship or just status symbols? Rogan's episode triggered fallout. Comments poured in from brand defenders and shoppers who felt betrayed. Luxury houses already defensive over tariffs and supply. Chain transparency suddenly faced a PR storm. Rogan's reach forced them to engage or recalibrate messaging around origin and ethics. Rogan spotlighted factories walking away, claiming major brands won't get another stitch after tariffs and transparency demands. He painted a picture of a power shift, factories and consumers starting to hold brands accountable. He suggested this could trigger a seismic supply chain realignment globally. Rogan repeatedly challenged viewers, demand to see where your luxury comes from. He equated it with demanding truth in every market, from groceries to gadgets. This wasn't just about bags. It was a broader call for transparency in total consumer culture. Here's the bottom line. Joe Rogan is sounding the alarm. What looked like genius luxury branding now looks like a game built on massive markups and hidden production. Chinese factories have allegedly walked away, and the world has seen the real cost. We have a choice. Believe the mystique or demand the math. The real question Rogan leaves hanging is a luxury about history and craft, or just a logo with a price that costs us more than we knew.